Hello, everyone. Let's continue reading A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tillie. Suddenly, a quiet, odd gasp escaped Poppy's mouth. Look, Rune, she whispered, pointing into the distance. I wondered what she wanted me to see. Then she said, Our footprints in the sand. She lifted her head and smiled a beaming smile. 2 sets, 4 prints, just like the poem. I pulled my eyebrows down in confusion. Poppy's hand lay over my bent knee, with her head tucked under the shelter of my arms. She explained, It's my favorite poem, Rune. It was my mama's favorite too. What does it say? I asked, smiling slightly at the tiny size of Poppy's footprint next to my own. It's beautiful, and it's spiritual, so I'm not sure what you'll think of it. Poppy sent me a teasing look. Tell me anyway. I urged, just to hear her voice, just to hear the reverence in her tone when she shared something she adored. It's more of a story, really, about someone who has a dream. In the dream, they are on a beach just like this, but they're walking beside the Lord. My eyes narrowed and Poppy rolled her eyes. I told you it was spiritual, she said, laughing. You did, I replied and nudged her head with my chin. Keep going. Poppy sighed, and with her finger she traced the lazy patterns in the sand. My heart kind of cracked when I saw it was another infinity sign. As they're walking on the beach in a dark sky above the person's life, it's played out for them to see. As each scene is played, like a movie reel, the person notices that 2 sets of footprints were left in the sand behind them. And as they continued, every new scene brought with it a trail of their footprints. Poppy's attention honed in on our footprints. When all the scenes have been played, the person looks back on the trail of footprints and notices something strange. They notice that during the saddest or most depressing and despairing times of their life, there was only 1 set of footprints. For happier times, there was always 2 sets. My eyebrows furrowed, wondering where the story was headed. Poppy lifted her chin and blinked in the bright glare of the sun. With watery eyes, she looked at me and continued, The person is really troubled by this. The Lord said that when a person dedicates their life to Him, He would walk with them through all the ups and downs. The person didn't ask the Lord, why, at the worst points of their life, did He abandon them? Why did He leave? An expression of deep comfort washed over Poppy's face. And what? I prompted. What does the Lord say? A single tear fell from her eye. He tells the person that He had walked with them their whole life through. But, he explains, the times where there is only a single set of footprints were not when He walked beside them, but instead when He carried them. Poppy sniffed and said, I don't care if you're not religious, Rune. The poem is not only for the faithful. We all have people who carry us through the worst of times, the saddest of times, the times that seem impossible to break free from. In one way or another, whether it's through the Lord or a loved one or both, when we feel like we can't walk on anymore, someone swoops in to help us. Someone carries us through. Poppy rested her head on my chest, wrapping herself up in my waiting arms. My eyes got lost in a blurred haze as I stared at our footprints embedded in the sand. At that moment, I wasn't sure who was helping who, because as much as Poppy insinuated that it was me who was helping her through her final moments, I was beginning to believe that she was somehow saving me. A single set of footprints on my soul. Poppy shifted to face me, her cheeks wet with tears, happy tears, odd tears, Poppy tears. Isn't it beautiful, Rune? Isn't it the most beautiful thing you've ever heard? I just nodded. Right now wasn't the time for words. I couldn't compete with what she just recited, so why would I even try? I let my focus drift around the beach, and I wondered if anyone else had just heard something so moving that it rocked their very core. I wondered if the person they love more than any other on the planet had opened up to them so purely, with such raw emotion. Rune, Poppy said quietly from beside me. Yeah, baby? I replied softly. She turned her pretty face to me and cast me a weak smile. You okay? I asked, grazing my hand down her face. I'm getting tired, she admitted, reluctantly. My heart cracked. Over the past week, I had begun to see tiredness gradually creeping into her face when she'd done too much. And worse still, I could see how much she hated it, because it prevented her from enjoying all life's adventures. It's okay to be tired, Poppyman. It's not a weakness. Poppy's eyes dipped in defeat. I just hate it. I've always been of the opinion that sleep is a waste of time. I laughed at the cute pout that had formed on her lips. Poppy watched me, waiting for me to speak. Sobering, I said, the way I see it, if you sleep when you need to, it means we can do more when you're strong. I brushed the tip of my nose over hers and said, our adventures will be that much more special, and you know I like you sleeping in my arms. I've always thought you look kind of perfect there. Poppy sighed, and with one last glance at the sea, whispered, only you, Rune Christiansen, only you could give reason to my biggest hate so beautifully. Kissing her warm cheek, I stood and gathered our things. When everything was packed, I looked over my shoulder at the pair, then back at Poppy. Holding out my hand, I said, come on, sleepyhead, for old time's sake. Poppy looked at the pair, and an unrestrained giggle leapt from her throat. I pulled her to standing, and we walked slowly, hand in hand. Underneath the pier, the hypnotic sounds of the soft waves crashing against the old wooden beams cocooned where we stood. Without wasting any time, I crowded Poppy back against the wooden post, cupping her cheeks and bringing our lips together. My eyes closed as the warm skin of her cheeks heated up under my palms. My chest heaved, breathless, as our lips kissed slow and deep, while the cooling breeze rushed through Poppy's hair. Pulling away, I rolled my lips, savoring the taste of sun and cherries bursting on my mouth. Poppy's eyes fluttered open. Seeing how tired she appeared, I whispered for her, kiss 433. With Poppyman. Under the pier. Poppy smiled shyly, waiting for what had come next. My heart almost burst. The hint of teeth showing under her smile almost did make it burst, making it the perfect time to add, because I love her. I love her more than I could ever explain. My single set of footprints in the sand. Poppy's beautiful green eyes widened at my confession. They immediately shimmered, and tears spilled over and tracked down her cheeks. I tried to brush them away with my fingers as my heart pounded in my chest. But Poppy gripped my hand, softly nuzzling her cheek into my palm. Keeping my hand in place, she met my eyes and whispered back, I love you too, Rune Christiansen. I never ever stopped. She rose on tiptoes and brought my face down to stay opposite hers. My soulmate, my heart. A calmness settled over me, a restfulness as Poppy fell into my arms, her light breathing seeping through my shirt. I held her. I held her close, embracing this new feeling, until Poppy yawned. I tilted her head up to mine and said, let's get you home, beautiful. Poppy nodded, and folding herself to my side, let me walk her back to our things, then up to the car. Reaching into the pocket of her purse, I took the car keys and opened the passenger side door. Placing both hands on her waist, I lifted her to the seat, reaching across her to click the seatbelt into socket. As I pulled back, I placed a gentle kiss on Poppy's head. I heard her breathing hitch at my touch. I went to straighten up, when Poppy took hold of my arm and with thick tears on her cheeks whispered, "I'm sorry, Rune. I'm so sorry." "What for, baby?" I asked, my voice breaking at how sad she sounded. I pushed her hair back from her face as she said, "For pushing you away." My stomach hollowed out. Poppy's eyes searched for something in mine before her face contorted in pain. Fat tears poured down her paling face and her chest shuddered as she fought to calm her suddenly erratic breathing. "Hey," I said, planting my hands on her cheeks. Poppy looked up at me. "We could have been like this if I hadn't been silly. We could have found a way for you to come back. You could have been with me this whole time. With me, holding me, loving me. You loving me and me loving you so fiercely." Her voice stuttered, but she managed to finish. "I'm a thief. I stole our precious time, 2 years of you and me for nothing." It felt like my heart physically tore as Poppy cried, gripping tightly to my arm as if frightened I would turn away. How had she not realized by now that nothing could tear me away? "Shh," I soothed, moving my head to rest against hers. "Breathe, baby," I said softly. I placed Poppy's hand over my heart as she locked her gaze on mine. "Breathe." I repeated and smiled as she followed the rhythm of my heart to calm herself. I wiped her damp cheeks with my hands, melting when she sniffled, her chest jerking every so often through the sobs she set free. Seeing I had her attention, I said, "I won't take the apology, because there's nothing to apologize for. You told me the past no longer matters, that it's these moments that are important now." I steeled my emotions to say, "Our final adventure, me giving you chest-bursting kisses to complete your jar, and you just being you, loving me loving you for infinity," I trailed off. I stared intently and patiently into Poppy's eyes, smiling wide when she added, "Forever always." I closed my eyes, knowing I'd broken through her pain. Then when my eyes opened, Poppy giggled hoarsely. "There she is." I pressed one kiss onto each of the apples of her cheeks. "Here I am," she echoed, "so completely in love with you." Poppy lifted her head and kissed me. When she lay back in the seat, her eyes closed, called by sleep. I watched her for a second before moving to shut the door. Just as the door closed, I caught Poppy whispering, "Kiss 434, with my room at the beach, when his love came home." I could see through the window that Poppy had already drifted to sleep. Her cheeks were red from crying, but even in sleep, her lips were tilted upward. Giving the appearance of a smile. I wasn't sure how someone so perfect even existed. Moving around to the hood of the car, I pulled my smokes out of the back pocket of my jeans and struck the lighter. I inhaled as much needed drag. I closed my eyes as the hit of nicotine calmed me down. I opened my eyes and stared at the sunset. The sun was fading on the horizon, flashes of orange and pink in its wake. The beach was almost empty but for the old couple I had seen before. Only this time, when I watched them, still so in love after all these years, I didn't let myself feel grief. As I glanced back at Poppy sleeping in the car, I felt a happiness. I felt happy. I let myself feel happy even through all this hurt, because here I am, so completely in love with you. She loved me. Poppyman, my girl, she loved me. "That's enough," I said to the wind. "That's enough for right now." Throwing the smokes butt to the ground, I quietly slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sprang to life and I drove away from the beach. Sure, we'd be here again. And if we didn't, like Poppy said, we had this moment. We had this memory. She had her kiss, and I had her love. When I pulled into her driveway, dusk had fallen, the stars beginning to wake. Poppy had slipped all the way home, her light, rhythmic breathing, a comforting sound as I drove us down the dark roads towards home. Putting the car in park, I got out and walked around to her side. I opened the door as quietly as I could, undoing the seatbelt and scooping Poppy into my arms. She felt as if she weighed nothing as she instinctively curled into my chest, her warm breath drifting over my neck. I walked to her door. As I reached to the top step, the front door opened. Mr. Litchfield was standing in the hallway. I continued forward, and he moved out of my way, allowing me to carry Poppy to her bedroom. I saw Poppy's mama and sisters sitting in the living room watching TV. Her mama got to her feet. "Is she okay?" she whispered. I nodded. "She's just tired." Mrs. Litchfield leaned forward and kissed Poppy's forehead. "Sleep tight, baby," she whispered. My chest tightened at the sight. Then she nodded for me to take Poppy to her room. I walked her down the hallway and through to her bedroom, as gently as I could. I placed her on her bed, smiling when Poppy's arms naturally searched for me on the side of the bed in which I slept. When Poppy's breathing had evened out once again, I sat down on the side of her bed and ran my hand down her face. Leaning forward, I kissed her soft cheek and whispered, "I love you, Poppy, forever always." Rising from the bed, I froze when I caught sight of Mr. Litchfield in the doorway, watching, listening. My jaw clenched as he stared me down, inhaling a calming breath through my nose. I walked solemnly past him, down the hallway, and back out to the car to get my camera. I returned to the house to leave the car keys on the table in the hallway. As I entered, Mr. Litchfield walked from the living room. I stopped rocking awkwardly until he reached out his hand for the keys. I dropped him in his hand and went to turn to walk away. Before I could, he asked, "Did y'all have a good time?" Oh, okay. My shoulders tensed, forcing myself to respond. I met his eyes and nodded, throwing a wave to Mrs. Litchfield, Ada, and Savannah. I walked out the door and down the steps. As I reached the bottom step, I heard, "She loves you too, you know." Mr. Litchfield's voice brought my feet to a stop. Without looking back, I replied, "I know." I crossed the grass to my house. I went straight to my room and tossed the camera onto the bed. I intended to wait out the next few hours before I went to Poppy. But the more I stared at the camera bag, the more I wanted to see how the photos had turned out. The pictures of Poppy dancing in the sea. Without giving myself the chance to walk away, I grabbed the camera and sneaked down to the dark room in the basement. As I reached the door and turned the knob, I flicked on the light. I sighed, a strange feeling settling within me. Because Poppy had been right, my papa had prepared this room for me. My equipment was exactly where it would have been 2 years ago. The lines and pegs were ready and waiting. The process of developing the pictures felt as if I'd never been away. I enjoyed the familiarity of each step. Nothing was forgotten, like I had been born with the ability to do this. Like I had been given this gift. Poppy recognized that I had needed this in my life, when I was too blinded by the past to see it. The smell of chemicals hit my nose. An hour passed and I eventually stood back, the pictures on their pegs forming into shapes, second by second, revealing the moment caught on film. The red light didn't stop me from seeing the wonders that I'd captured. As I walked away along the lines of hanging images of life in its glory, I couldn't stave off the excitement burning in my chest. I couldn't stop to smile, for this work playing on my lips. Then I stopped. I stopped at a picture that held me captive. Poppy, holding on to the hem of her dress, dancing in the shallow water. Poppy, with a carefree smile and windblown hair, laughing wholeheartedly. Her eyes bright and her skin flushed as she looked over her shoulder, right at me, the sun lighting her face in an angle so pure and beautiful. It was as if it was a spotlight on her happiness. Attracted by her magnetic joy, I lifted my hand, keeping it a centimeter away from the picture, and traced my finger over her beaming face, over her soft lips and rosy cheeks, and I felt it. Felt the overwhelming passion for this craft burst back to life inside me. This picture, this one picture, cemented what I had secretly known all along. I was meant to do this with my life. It made sense that this picture brought this message home. It was of the girl that was my home. A knock sounded at the door, and without taking my gaze from the picture, I answered, "Yeah?" The door opened slowly. I felt who it was before I looked. My papa entered the dark room by only a few steps. I looked at him, but I had to turn away again at the expression on his face, as he drank in all the pictures hanging from the pegs across the room. I didn't want to confront what that feeling in my stomach meant. Not yet. Minutes passed by in silence before my papa said softly, "She's absolutely beautiful, son." My chest constricted when I saw his eyes on the photo that I was still standing before. I didn't respond. My papa stood awkwardly in the doorway, saying nothing else. Finally, he moved to leave. As he went to shut the door, I forced myself to say a sharp "thank you" for the camera. In my peripheral vision, I saw my papa pause. I heard a slow, ragged intake of breath, then he replied, "You have nothing to thank me for, son. Nothing at all." With that, he left me in my dark room. I stayed longer than I intended, replaying my papa's response in my mind. Clutching 2 photographs in my hands, I climbed the steps of the basement and headed for my room. As I passed the open door of Alton's bedroom, I saw him sitting on his bed, watching TV. He hadn't seen me standing there in this doorway, and I carried on to my room. But as I heard him laugh at whatever he was watching, my feet stuck to the floor, and I made myself turn back. As I entered his room, Alton turned to me, and in a move that made me feel a crack in my chest, the biggest smile spread on his cute face. "Hey, Rune," he said quietly, and he sat further up in the bed. "Hey," I replied. I walked toward his bed and nodded toward the TV. "What are you watching?" Alton looked at the TV, then back to me. "Swamp monsters." His head tipped to the side, and then he pushed his long hair from his face. Something in my stomach tugged as he did. "You want to watch it with me for a while?" Alton asked nervously, then dropped his head. I could tell he thought I would say no. Surprising both him and myself, I replied, "Sure." Alton's blue eyes widened to the size of saucers. He lay stiffly on his bed. When I stepped forward, he shuffled to the side of the narrow mattress. I lay down beside him, kicking up my feet. Then Alton leaned against my side and continued watching his show. I watched it with him, only looking away when I caught him staring up at me. When I met his eyes, his cheeks flushed with red, and he said, "I like you watching this with me, Rune." Breathing through the unfamiliar feeling his words brought out, I ruffled his long hair and replied, "Me too, Alt. I like this too." Alton leaned back against my side. He lay there until he fell asleep, the timer on his TV kicking in and plunging the room into darkness. Rising out of bed, I passed my mama. who had been watching silently from the hallway. I nodded my head at her as I entered my room, turning and shutting the door behind me. I flipped the lock, placed one of the photos on the desk, and climbed through my window and ran across to Poppy's. When I entered her room, Poppy was still sleeping. Taking out my shirt, I walked around the side of her bed to where she slept. I placed the photo of us kissing by the water on her pillow for her to see as soon as she woke up. I climbed into her bed, Poppy automatically finding me in the dark, laying her head against my chest and wrapping her arm around my waist. Four footprints in the sand. That'll be it for this video, but I hope you watch again in the next video. But for now,